A very warm welcome to our speaker of the day, Dr. Joshua Harimulya from Bandung Law School, who will be sharing insights from his academic paper titled Under the Shadows of Business as Usual, Nationally Determined Contribution for Climate Action. Today marks the second episode of this year's Arnec Paper Talks NDC series. And if this is the first time for you, let me introduce Arnec to you. ARNEC, or short for the ASEAN Researchers Network on Energy and Climate Change, is an academic collective established by the ASEAN Center for Energy. The ARNEC Paper Talk is part of the perks of being registered as an ARNEC member. So, if you would like to explore and experience all the benefits of being part of our network, please find the link for registration to be one, which you will find in the chat box below. So, now that we have introduced Arnec to you, I would like to introduce our moderator today, Ms. Alia Febrianti. Ms. Alia is currently a junior officer of the Energy Modeling and Policy Planning Division for the ASEAN Center for Energy. She will be moderating this session and leading this discussion with our speaker today. So, if in any time you have any question that you would like to ask during the session, please send them to the Q&A box below. So, without further ado, I would like to pass over the stage to Ms. Alia. Ms. Alia, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Tania, for your kind introduction. And a very good afternoon to all participants here and very warm welcome to Arnec Paper Talks. And I'm very excited to be here because in this edition, we will dive deep and discuss together how Southeast Asia countries use business as usual policy approaches in their NDCs. And our discussion will focus on the comparative legal, like whether the progress, their status, and so on, towards climate change actions. And that is why we have invited an expert in environmental law to talk more on legal perspective for NDCs. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Joshua Harimulya from Bandung Law School, Indonesia. And he is a professional lecturer, legal consultant, and researcher with an area of interest in international law, particularly in environmental sector. And previously, he worked at the International Law Department, Pajajaran University in Indonesia until 2018. He also pursued an academic experience in the Netherlands Academy for Empirical Legal Studies at Universiteit Leiden and Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. And maybe without further ado, let's begin first with the presentation from Dr. Joshua, and then we proceed to have questions and answers and also from the public. For Dr. Joshua, maybe I would like to give the mic to you now. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. So I would like to share my screen. Okay, so my paper is
Sorry, Dr. Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please continue, Dr. Joshua.
So my paper is discuss about how the policy approach to climate change will affect the nationally determined contribution for climate action. This paper is made by a team, Dr. Neti, myself, and Ibu Niken, and my colleague as well, Nanda Viko. And the first one, I would like to begin with the Paris Agreement approach and policy and energy. The first one is why NDC become the main topic of my research paper, because based on Paris Agreement, states should control the climate change. So in Paris Agreement, it is said that we should control the temperature of the Earth 1.50 degrees, or not to exceed 2.00 degrees. And how do all countries reach the target in Paris Agreement? So they have a legal basis in Paris Agreement and express it in national determined contribution. Compared to the previous legal instrument, which is Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement is a bottom-up approach, but the Kyoto Protocol is a top-down approach. And one of the a way to to reach the target is through the fossil fuel and renewable energy. However, in Southeast Asia, dependency on fossil fuel is still high, and one of the countries Indonesia. So I would like to see from Indonesian perspective and compare it to Thailand and Philippines later. And this is the climate change approach to achieve the NDC target for each country. The first one is called absolute emission reduction targets or absolute basin. The example of this policy is applied in the Netherlands, and the second one is business as usual. Most of Southeast Asia countries use this policy approach, and the third one is intensity reductions, or I call it carbon intensify, and it is used by China. And the last one is project absent of greenhouse gases emission targets. The next one, what is the difference between carbon intensify and absolute basin? Maybe I will skip this part, and if we still have enough time, we will go back to discuss to compare about carbon intensify and absolute basin. So how Indonesia approach to climate change through energy transition policy. The first one, Indonesia contributes and expresses national the NDC into political will. The first one is second NDC in 2016. Indonesia said that, oh, we set a target with 29% until 41%. And later in 2022, in enhanced NDC, Indonesia increase the target from 31% to 43%. This means Indonesia is aware of the serious impact of climate change. And to respond this NDC, Indonesia issued the presidential regulation number 112 year 2002 about accelerating of the development renewable energy for electricity supply. The main purpose of this regulation is to accelerate for decreasing the greenhouse gases. So the perusahaan listrik negara, or we call it as a state-owned enterprise or BUMN, they make a electric supply business plan, and later I would like to show you they created two scenarios to decrease the greenhouse gases impact towards climate change. So the commitment of Indonesia based on Paris agreements contains five principles for implementing into a policy. The first one is practice energy efficiency. The second one, greater use of renewable energy and electrification of industrial and household processes, electric transportation, and the last one, carbon capture and storage through carbon market and carbon tax. These principles will apply in 5 sectors as follows: agriculture, industrial processes and product use or IPPU, forest and other land use, energy and waste. And how the government will implement the policy, they combine it with national energy policy and supporting regulation for national energy policy. So with energy availability for national needs, it needs the energy conservation, and the priority of energy development, it needs environmental and safety. And the next one is utilization of national natural resources. The supporting regulation for this policy, the government should arrange for the price, subsidy, and energy intensify. And for the last one, energy national reserve, it needs access infrastructure for society and energy industry, research and development for energy technology and implementation, and the last one, institution and funding. And this is the big picture how challenges and opportunities in Indonesia. So with Volu Finance, Energy and Waste, I would like to highlight there is vertical coherence in Indonesia that should be aware, because in Indonesia there is a hierarchy of regulations between act or law or undang-undang, government regulation or peraturan pemerintah, perpres or kepres or presidential regulation or decree, permen or capman as ministerial regulations and decree. And the second one is about horizontal coherence, different regulations at the same level of arrangement. The third one is substitution, different regulations and similar arrangement. The fourth one is complementary with different regulations complement each other arrangement. And the last one is antagonistic, different regulations contradict each other. So from the coherence, we can see along with climate change policy, regulations regarding carbon becomes the main area that regulation should be coherent, vertically and horizontally. Regulations regarding carbon are Law number 7 years 2021 about harmonization of tax regulations in Indonesia, Perpres 98 years 2021 about carbon pricing, and so on. So I would like to continue with the next slide. This is what is supporting regulation and which regulation does not support for each category that I've mentioned before. And the next one, in order to achieve net zero emission to support nationally determined contribution, climate change action policy through energy sector has to implement a clean project that environmentally sounds. Collaborative action is important between developed and developing countries. So, European Union member states has already started a movement to establish a project that is relating to climate change as known as green growth. It's a combination action blending grants and loans from their member development banks for supporting renewable energy project. Renewable energy project itself is the implementation of energy transition. So in Indonesia in 2022, Indonesia received 1 billion euro from European Investment Bank to support just energy transition. The plan of renewable energy project based on energy transition requires regulation to implement it into a legal framework such as Law number 30 year 2009 on electricity, Government Regulation number 14 year 2012 on electric supply business, activities, Ministerial Environmental, uh, Ministerial Energy and Mineral Regulation number 50 year 2017 on utilization of renewable energy resources for the production of electricity and so on. And renewable energy project is intended to reach the nationally determined contribution that has been set to 31%. With the funding from EU, Indonesia should cover all sectors, which covers agriculture, IPPU, follow energy, and waste management. But in fact, the government still focus on forestry and land use sectors. So this is the cooperation with European Union. The European Union and Indonesia has a cooperation that comprehensive economic partnership agreement, or we call it SIPA, and the European Union Indonesia Forest Law Enforcement Governance Trade Voluntary Partnership Agreement, or FLAG VPA, and then the European Union Indonesia Forest Law Enforcement Governance Trade Voluntary Partnership Agreement aims to improve the forest governance and law enforcement in Indonesia. Then the last one is the EU could help Indonesia to reduce its greenhouse gases emission and achieve its climate targets. And this I would like to show you the policy approach in Southeast Asia. I compare Indonesia to Thailand and Philippines. As we can see, the first NDC in 2020 and the updated NDC in 2022. So Thailand, overall, it's critically insufficient because in the first NDC, the conditional target is reduce greenhouse gas emission by 25% from projected business as usual level by 2030. And in updated NDC, conditional target reduces greenhouse gases by 40% from the projected BAU by 2030. And unconditional target is reduced by 20% in 2030, and unconditional target is reduced it into 30%. And how about the Philippines? The Philippines is insufficient, 70% below undisclosed BAU by 2030 in conditional target, but in updated NDC, they increased 5%. And from the unconditional target from none into 2.71% reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And how about Indonesia? Indonesia is highly insufficient because from 41%, they increase the target in 43.2 and unconditional target from 29% into 31% in 2030. And this is the implementation. I mean, this already mentioned before. So energy, waste, IPPU, agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, or FOLU, with the annual average growth from BAU, it's from 2010 until 2030. And okay, I'll skip this one. And this I already mentioned before. So the National Electricity Company of Indonesia sets an action plan with the two scenarios that covers energy sector and renewable energy. The first one is optimal scenario, and the second one is low carbon scenario. What is optimal scenario? The optimal scenario is reduced emission with the target 23% from contribution of renewable energy project. If the scenario works, approximately 710 billion tons of CO2 will decrease from BAU. It needs additional action such as co-firing coal with biomass as the source of the coal-firing power plant and design a new type of power plant. The new type of power plant will replace the current power plant in the future to phase out coal until 2030. This is an example of renewable energy project with minimum effort to achieve the target of NDC. And the second one is the low carbon scenario. The scenario will decrease 998 million tons of CO2. With the scenario, it is not only contribution of 23% from the renewable energy project, but also will cut the level of utilization of coal into 59% by 2030. So, to deal with BAU and accelerate NDC by renewable energy project, Indonesia should combine optimal scenario with carbon intensity for the first period from 2025 and later mix it with low carbon approaches plus absolute basin until 2030. Combination of those scenarios will make renewable energy project accelerating faster and aims higher 12 until 22% to reduce emissions in 2030. To fulfill the commitment to its NDC, Indonesia requires to phase out coal-firing power plant by co-firing with biomass and multilateral financing mechanism. All of those should regulate in transformative energy transition under a legal framework with concerning about the policy should vertically and horizontally coherent, then implemented into renewable energy project related to NZE, which leads to carbon neutrality global sink is in 2050. However, the government of Indonesia sets the target in 2060, but realistically, this is my personal opinion, it should be achieved in 2070. So what's the lesson learned from climate change NDC and energy transition program? It relates to human rights aspect. Uh, I compare Southeast Asia countries to European Union countries. The first cases is related to climate change and human rights is Urgenda case. Urgenda case is case in the Netherlands. The government has been sued because uh, the government should be more ambitious to set their goals in 2030. So the government has responsibility not only about climate change but also human rights aspect. And the second one is Royal Dutch Shell case. It's about the corporation liability and responsibility. So Shell has been sued by several citizens and an NGO. It is called Friends of the Earth. Uh, Shell contributes a big or a massive greenhouse gases, so they need to responsible for the emission, and it is divided into three scope. The first scope is the Shell production itself. The second one is the scope of what Shell sell to the consumer, and the third one is the last scope is Shell utilization in industry and so on. And how about in Southeast Asia countries? From the Philippines, I would like begin from minor oposa case, and then later maybe carbon major. We can discuss it in uh, question and answer later. And in Indonesia, the cases of human rights and business related to climate change is Jakarta air pollution, Pari Island versus Holcim, and Tanjung Pati. So the conclusion is BAU is still dominating in Southeast Asia. I divided Philippines as a lower middle income country, Indonesia as a lower middle income, and Thailand is upper middle income country. As an approach in nationally determined contribution and legal framework for combating NDC, uh, countries should be more ambitious and should move from BAU into different level of policy approach. The incomes of those countries inversely with the climate change mitigation position of climate change mitigation and condition of its NDC, or I'll put it into a rank, is Thailand is critically insufficient, rank 42, Indonesia is highly insufficient, rank 25, and the Philippines is sufficient with the rank of 12. And dependency in fossil fuel has major contribution in current Indonesia energy policy. As a consequences to fulfill the NDC towards NCT, in energy transition should direct it into legal framework, and it will create fundamental legal basis to be implemented in renewable energy project. And the last one, Indonesia needs to adjust the approach in climate change action from BAU compared to absolute basin or carbon intensity approach for accelerating in climate change action and create trajectory into transformative legal policy in energy transition. That's my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joshua, and that is a very insightful presentations. You also compares Indonesia with other countries like Philippines and Thailand, and maybe that also inflict questions and answers from the public, from the participants. And I would like to also remind again for the participants here, if you have any questions to Dr. Joshua's presentation, just feel free to add it in the Q&A chat box. But while waiting for the participants' questions, I would like to summarize first about your presentations that you compare those three countries where like Thailand, they are critically insufficient. Meanwhile, Indonesia is like highly insufficient because they have target increase more ambitiously, but the implementation also like face challenges. And then to achieve those targets with BAU scenarios, you've also mentioned to use approach with carbon intensity and also absolute basin, which means that you need to reduce emission while also limiting the increasing of the temperature. And you also like give the preview about action towards energy transition with the need to use the justice approach, like respecting human rights. And you mentioned about human rights cases on climate change, especially in Indonesia, like air pollutions in Jakarta, and then and it maybe also give participants to wonder about their cases in each countries in Southeast Asia. And you also concluded that business as usual still dominating in Southeast Asia and disease policy, and that lead to insufficient implementations. And yeah, I would like again to invite everyone give questions to Dr. Joshua if you have anything to clarify. So just please feel free to add it in the chat box. So while waiting, we also have like several questions regarding your presentations. And you've mentioned that none of the three countries are on track actually with the target of Paris Agreement. And I want to know, like, what do you think they need to do? Like, what are the practical steps they can do better while they are still growing their economies? That's my first question, Dr. Joshua, please.
Sorry, could you repeat it once again?
Okay, so yeah, so you've mentioned that none of those countries are actually on track with the target of Paris Agreement, right? And what do you think they need to do? Like, what are the practical steps? Maybe you can use like Indonesia case, like what are they need to do because they need to also like growing their economies, you know?
Okay, so my question is, I should bring the previous regulation or in international instrument legal framework, Kyoto Protocol. So in Kyoto Protocol 1997, there are three mechanisms: clean development mechanism, and then joint implementation, and emission trading or carbon trading. However, the approach of Kyoto Protocol is top-down and legal. It is binding for the Annex 1 countries, the 41 countries, and developing countries or countries outside the Annex 1 is not binding. So they can create or they can do cooperation between countries or between states, but in Paris Agreement, it's a bottom up approach. It means uh, every countries have same responsibility with different portion. So that's why it is become a principle, common but differentiated responsibility. And later, it is become common but differentiated responsibility and respective capability. Why? Respective capability because they have different portion, different capability, but they need to express it into NDC. For example, like Indonesia, oh, I would like to contribute 29%, but if you can help me, this will be greater into 41%. So because of the mechanism of Paris Agreement is not really binding, so yeah, we can say it's not really mandatory. That's why every countries they ask for cooperation, especially in developing countries. I would like to highlight in Southeast Asia countries. They would like to ask for the donation or the grants or the cooperation with members of EU, for example, like Indonesia with Norwegia. In the past, we have a program with RADD and RADD Plus, but deforestation still happens. And why it still happens? Because the government of Indonesia, they only care to achieve the numbers, the target, the numbers, but the awareness, we need to be more ambitious. Why? Because I already mentioned, if the government of Indonesia is uh, taking a serious action, they need to control not only coal mining but coal industry, because in coal mining it is the risk of the coal mining is minimum, but it is greater if it's the coal used in industry. For example, like electricity vehicle, uh, the production of electricity in Indonesia, it still uh, has dependency on fossil fuel, and coal has the prime or the main source of the energy. And um, some uh, some NGOs and some uh, legal scholars, they fight for more ambitious action, That's why I already mentioned the case is Tanjung Pati A. Tanjung Pati is a coal-firing power plant, and uh, the judge decide, oh, you should uh, include the climate change action into your consideration before you uh, make production or any greater business, something like that. And mm, there is no mandatory and uh, punishment in Paris Agreement because it is voluntary. What should be done? States should be more transparent and becomes more clear in because they need to report their NDC periodically. So transparency and accountability is a must, I think, so we can share the same goals, the same framework. I think that's my question.
Yeah, that is very
Sorry,
insightful.
that's my answer. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think I would like agree with you that Indonesia also needs to set cooperations, and that is why they receive a lot of fundings from EU, for example, and they request grants to develop countries, and that is a very things need to discuss also whether those cooperations also actually effective enough or not. And then you've also mentioned that the risk of mining in mining is actually minimum, but the industry is maximum. But Indonesia, we also need like to increase, grow our economies, and that is why what Indonesia need to do is using approach of low carbon economies. But then several challenges also still need to be addressed. And maybe that's also, I want to have like a follow-up questions to you. You've mentioned that Paris Agreement is voluntary, right? And then that's why transparency and accountability is a must. And I want to know from your perspective, since you are coming from the legal, and I would like to know, does that international law is limiting Southeast Asia to go beyond business as usual policy? So what are the things in Southeast Asia need to do to increase also transparency?
Uh, okay, so if we are talking about international law, we cannot separate it from global political uh, relation. And in international law, it is said that, I don't know, it's in Latin, par in parem non habet imperium. It means that each country has sovereignty and they should have regulation independently. So in international law, you should comply, take it or leave it. So what should be done? We can promote the climate change issues, not only from regulation, but we can pursue the government through the litigation. That's why climate change issue is related to human rights aspect and also climate change litigation. That's why uh, I take a lesson learned from the Netherlands because European Union is the par excellence of example for combating climate change. They can use not only regulations but also litigation to warn the government you should do this, this, and this, not only from regulation but also from litigation. So in simply ways, climate change litigation is regulating the regulatory because if we are making regulation, it takes time, it takes many interests, and it's very complicated. But from a litigation perspective, it's more fast. It is faster and more doable and enforceable. So, if I'm not mistaken, there's a movement in Southeast Asia countries uh, to make a petition. Oh, we should do this, 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 and this. But I don't follow. I don't follow their action, but I think from 2024 there's an action to do that because activists, especially environmental activists, they face a greater danger as a SLAP strategic lawsuit against participation because they will face big companies. So the company and the government, they have like relations. Oh, I have my business. You should facilitate my business through the regulation. So please be kind to me, and then uh, don't change the regulations so fast because we need investment and so on and so on and so on. That's why I would like to ask the just energy transition, why the why the energy transition still like going in circle? We still use the coal-fired power plant, and coal mining still have a greater impact in our daily life and so on. So that's my question. That's my answer.
Yeah, agree, because political relations is such a dynamic and it's the key driver to drive the regulations. Like in Indonesia, we have a lot of regulations, but then the implementations itself, we need to check whether they're also has aligned and has achieved the targets. And maybe I'd like to step back again from your presentations regarding the comparison from those three countries like Indonesia, Thailand, and Philippines. And it's why we have a question from Joshua Dinoso. He asked, what are the criteria and indicators in determining the insufficiency of the countries mentioned are used to assess this rating? So, and what do they reveal about the adequacy of the current policies?
Okay, what criteria and indicators in
Yes.
determining the insufficient of
Yeah.
the countries?
Yeah.
Okay. So I took the data. I'm not sure if my co-author is here or not. The publication is made by Dr. Neti, myself, Ikan from National Innovative Agency or BRIN, and my colleague as well, Nanda Viko. Uh, Nanda Viko and I, especially Nanda Viko, he took the data from a climate action tracker. So I didn't put the rank itself, the category itself, but I took it from a climate action tracker. So based on the data, we combine the data and with our analysis, and that's the report from action tracker. So it's not by me the rank like insufficient, highly insufficient, and so on. So you can see all of the countries, not only Southeast Asia countries, in climate action tracker. And what's the follow-up questions? And what do they reveal about the adequacy for current policies? So they set the NDC into their own legal framework. So they have common ground, but also have different sectors or aspect. For example, is Indonesia, it's higher in forestry, but Philippines, I think it's in other sectors. And also with Thailand, maybe higher in industry, but they have the same common ground. It's about energy transition policy.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for your answer, Dr. Joshua. But you mentioned that you use also the data. May I ask, the data, is it the Environmental Policy Index, right?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So those index you use, is that if I'm not mistaken, that you use also like the carbon growth rate in each countries, and then you projected the emissions in the each countries by 2050, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joshua. I hope that that answered Joshua's question. And maybe we also have like a lot of questions in here. Maybe first start with the questions from, I'm not sure who is it from, but it stated that we are aware that almost all ASEAN member states are transitioning towards net zero emission. However, I am wondering if there is a tool to track their readiness towards NDC and net zero emission. In this case, how do we assess if a country is not willing, but also ready in terms of technology, like technology, human resource, and financing?
Okay. Uh, so it's about political will again. So uh, it is very complicated if we are talking about politics because the government decide the uh, the target and how the country will achieve the target and so on. So I think for promoting climate change action is I already mentioned about climate change litigation because it is, for example, from Indonesian perspective, it is very hard to pursue through the regulation because as we know, since if I'm not mistaken, 2016 or 18, uh, National Strategic Program or PSN, Program Strategi Nasional, Indonesia launched the project and it's still growing and so on and so on. And the indicator of carbon footprints is steel and cement. So can we imagine in national strategic programs the capacity of steel and cement is still high, and how do we decrease or we deaccelerate the thing is through the public participation. So through public participation, we should tell the government you should stop, you should do this and this, and uh, I don't know if we can make another movement uh, besides climate change litigation action because legal aspects or aspects outside the legal aspect itself, it's been compromised by many interest stakeholders. And why is it set by the years? Because it is mandatory from international cooperation.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Joshua, for your answers. And I believe that we actually have a lot of tools to track their readiness, but we have like different indicators in each institution, for example. And yeah, so that is why we also need to work on that as a researcher too. And maybe I would like to jump to the question from Ranga, Dr. Joshua. So from Ranga, he mentioned that several studies like ILO and IRENA suggest that Indonesia's energy transition could generate around 1.6 until 2.7 million additional job years. But at the same time, there's also like jobs disappear. And what do you think is the concrete strategies to ensure a just transition, especially for workers in coal regions like in Kalimantan and Sumatra?
Okay, to be honest, it is a broader question, uh, and it is, I think it is related about one of the topic or one of the issue. If we want to make a movement, oh, you should make an energy transition, but what will you do with the workers? That's the what the shackles if you want to move from one part to another part. But on the other hand, the government should provide them with another program or another project. So it should not be a problem because the government still have a national strategic program. So for example, from Kalimantan and Sumatra, they can be transported into another national strategic program for a period of time. For example, like oh, we should do like the the green infrastructure, and we need like 100,000 workers or maybe 10,000 workers. Do you want to work in this sector for 5 years or so on? So it should not be a problem, I think.
Yeah.
And the local government as well, because the quantity and the quality of the local government's agencies should be more should be more uh, take into account, because for example in West Java countries, for environmental uh, agency, as we know as PPNS, pegawai negeri sipil, it's still lack in quantity, but the number of corporation is maybe thousands. So if there if there's a case, uh, is it enough to handle the case by 6 persons only, or we should increase it 10 times or
Mhm.
so on?
Mhm.
So I think energy transition and uh, employment should be get along.
Mhm.
So we should not be crash one issue to another issue. I think that's it.
Yeah, yeah. But I think I want to know also like your perspective since you are in law, and I want to know whether this is also an issue in regulations in Indonesia, for example, because we also against workers' respect, right? Because they are working in coal regions, but then suddenly they need to move or shift to renewable energy sector, for example. Is there issues in a legal perspective?
There's also an issue in legal perspective, but since oh, I forgot to answer the ILO and IRENA.
Yeah.
Uh, what's the question again? Oh, suggest that Indonesia energy transition should generate. Okay, okay. It's not only unwilling but unable. So I think it is the same thing in human rights aspect related to employment. So you cannot pursue the worker. You should move. I mean, like you should move if you want to, because it's the same here in Indonesia, or maybe Indonesia is more flexible, but not really flexible. But the government should set a standard of, if you want to work in this area, you should comply with this, and we will guarantee your rights as follows, like uh, appropriate salary, uh, and then enough apa enough working hours, not overtime
Yeah.
working hours on, and so on. And also like freedom of movement and freedom of workers. If you don't want work here, you can try there or some other places. Should be more transparent. And it's not only in Indonesia, but I think it should be in Southeast Asia countries. But
Mhm.
I don't know, since in ASEAN countries we don't need visa, so it should be easier, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think we also need to consider if each worker's human rights respect, and then we also need to think about their impacts when we transitioning towards renewable energy. And maybe I would like to also move to another questions regarding Indonesia's geothermal resources. Uh, there's a question, why have Indonesia's geothermal resources, the Philippines' early climate legislation, and Thailand's energy efficiency plans not been enough to achieve sufficient emission reductions?
Uh, okay. Why have Indonesia's geothermal resources, the Philippines early climate, and
Plans not been enough to
Okay.
achieve sufficient. So why? The reason why their policy is not sufficient enough to reduce emissions.
Okay. I've limited knowledge to this question because in energy sector is new energy and renewable energy. And to be honest, I think geothermal is renewable energy. Uh, it's not only about the geothermal itself, but also with the forestry aspect. So, for example, geothermal is below the land, so it's from the the heat of the earth itself, the geothermal. What we should uh, preserve the forestry because the forest is absorb the water and the water will boiled by the heat itself and there's the geothermal will work. And why it's not working, we should ask the forestry area, have you conserved your forest, or you should set a parameter. You should not open mining permit in this area because there's a geothermal mining here, and we should conserve the forest above the land. I think that's my question
Yeah.
because I have limited knowledge to the geothermal
Yeah.
aspect for transition energy.
Yeah, maybe if I would like to also give a statement also that you in the presentation you also mentioned like one of the challenges why the policy is not sufficient enough is that Indonesia still has a high bureaucracy, for example, and then that's hindering Indonesia to achieve those targets. And then regulation should be also coherent horizontally and also vertically. So that is why I think all stakeholders must come join hand in hand to work together on those regulations. Yeah, and that is understandable, Dr. Joshua. Thank you for your insight. And maybe I would like to move on to next questions from Arif Haris. And he actually also asked to Dr. Joshua and the moderator. And he asked, what would you say is the most effective advocacy strategy to better align these sectoral policies with the NDC targets, particularly outside of the energy sector? So maybe Dr. Joshua, if you have answers to this
Okay,
question.
it's about besides the energy sector. So, if I'm not mistaken, uh, okay, uh, so it has to be the forestry because forestry and energy sector it covers more than 90% of the contribution to decrease the greenhouse gases. So if the question is particularly outside the energy sector, the answer is forestry sector because the before Paris Agreement, forestry is uh, the main uh, the main area for combating climate change. And after Paris Agreement, oh, there's a thought that there's a AVOLU sector, including energies, waste, and IPPU. So the advocacy, we should advocacy with we should give our voices to the government, especially the local government, because it's for example like in Thailand or in Philippines, it's very difficult to reach each other, but you can deliver your voice to the local government the same as in Indonesia, because how come if you are from Aceh or if you are from Papua and you will deliver your voice to the central government in Jakarta, it's too far away and it's I don't know if it's heard or not. So the best way is your advocacy through your local government and your movement. But it's not easy because you will face business activities. For example, like in Maluku or Sulawesi, the case of Pulau Obi, Obi Island. Obi Island is a small island that produces nickel, the main source of uh, lithium, and the lithium itself is a main source of the battery for the green electric vehicle and so on. But the quality of the people in this island is it's far from a good quality, and environmental pollution is everywhere and so on. And it is very hard for us if you want to investigate or to make a research about the Obi Island. But you can read the report from, if you're from Indonesia, you can read Tempo several months ago. So it's about the Obi, Pulau Obi. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I will agree with you regarding the advocacy strategy. So I think like multi-stakeholder dialogue is actually like a must, but then we have like thousands populations in Indonesia, for example, and then gathering those interests is not always easy. And then, but we also need to, showing our benefits of each stakeholders, like building coalitions in those society, and then like giving feedback to the governments and so on. But then the implementations itself, again, it's hard. And you've mentioned also like the bureaucracy is also the challenges part. So I think that's also my answer as the moderator today. And we actually like have limited time, but then we have like a lot of questions in here. Maybe like one last questions before we end this discussion. This question is from Tozi, Dr. Joshua, and he asked, how can Indonesia and other ASEAN countries accelerate the transition to renewable energy? And not only to reduce carbon emissions, but also to serve as a disaster risk mitigation strategy against climate-related hazards, such as floods, droughts, heat waves that are becoming increasingly frequent.
Okay. In the context of the energy, okay. Accelerate the transition of not only to reduce carbon, but also serve. Okay. So my paper is talk about the mitigation action, and the question is more just than mitigation. It's about adaptation. Uh, we should increase our awareness. For example, like this activity, like our next paper talk, is about increasing the awareness of the climate change through energy transition. And it's not easy because climate change is already happening, and we should adapt with what we should do. But if we are in mitigation, oh, what should we do to decrease the impact or the effect? So the question from Tozi is about what should we do? We should do to improve our technology, to improve the quality of our regulations, and then institution as well, and make cooperations among states and non-profit actors. For example, multinational companies play a big role in this problem or issue, and the government should be more put attention to I would like to highlight as a natural disaster like floods, droughts, and heat waves. And hopefully, we can achieve, at least we can achieve our NDC as we uh, said before. And in the future, we should increase our NDC higher than before. And I would like to read the uh, from Cristianto. I agree with him. Indonesia reliance on BAU is reflects relatively weak level of commitment. Yes, I agree, because Indonesia is only care about the number, but not really aware about what should done and what should we fix it in the future. And the last one, it's not only the policy itself, but also about the awareness and the program from the government. Because climate change issue is a very complex issue. It's not only from legal perspective or just from another perspective, but we need to combine it into comprehensive action. So, low perspective, we should combine it with another perspective. I think that's my
Yeah,
answer.
yeah. I think that marks also your last answers too. Thank you so much, Dr. Joshua and Cristianto, and that is why this our next theme today is under the shadows of business as usual. And we think that Indonesia is not only need to consider the BAU policy approach, but also maybe other projections too, like more ambitious. And thank you very much, Dr. Joshua. Of course, if the participants, if you have any another clarifications or questions, you can just really contact Dr. Joshua. And with that, maybe I would like to summarize what we have been discussing. I think it's a really great discussion, especially also from Dr. Joshua and the other participants too, that giving us the insights. And we explore like how the business as usual policy approach is sometimes like a scary enemy for developing countries, but this is actually like the most realistic solutions. And this has been quoted in also in the paper itself. We also touch upon the biggest challenges when addressing the impact, especially in the socioeconomic aspects. And we also focus on how we need to have like a comprehensive action plans and more effective policies that ensure a just transition for all stakeholders. So maybe that's also marks my last statement. Thank you very much also, Dr. Joshua. Special thanks to you for giving us your insights. And maybe I would like to give back to MC Tania. So please just close this today's webinar. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Alia, for moderating discussion. And thank you very much, Dr. Joshua, for the insights shared today from your analysis on the NDCs of Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. Moving on, the next agenda is a photo session with our speaker, Dr. Joshua, and moderator, Ms. Alia. To Dr. Joshua and Ms. Alia, please be ready and give your biggest smile to the camera. Perfect. So I will lead the countdown. 3, 2, 1. One more time, please. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you, Dr. Joshua Harimulya and Ms. Alia. To our speaker, Dr. Joshua, I would like to thank you for sharing the very insightful analysis on the state of Indonesia and the Philippines and the Thailand's NDCs. To recap, while the three countries have formulated their NDCs, a business-as-usual mindset still dominates, leaving their commitments far from the Paris Agreement's goals. And the study also reminds us that the climate change is not only an environmental challenge, but also a human rights issue, requiring inclusive and participatory approaches that protect vulnerable groups. The key message is that transforming NDCs from commitments into action requires stronger ambition, especially through a legal framework for energy transition, broader stakeholder engagement, and alignment of national policies with global climate goals to build a truly sustainable future. So, we have finally approached the end of today's ARNIC Paper Talk. Thank you everyone for attending and for your insightful questions. We hope that this discussion can provide insights for everyone. We will see you again in the next episode of ARNIC Paper Talks because ARNIC Paper Talks will be held monthly. So we hope to see you tuning in again next month in September. Stay tuned to our social media, newsletter, website to get more information on ARNIC Paper Talks and also all things net zero in Southeast Asia. As the Master of Ceremony, I, Natania Zalia, would like to thank everyone for taking part in ARNIC Paper Talks. We'll see you next time and have a wonderful afternoon. Goodbye, everyone.